Neanderthals of Thule by Conti Dankula channel. So yeah, let's watch it. What the fuck are waiters on this episode?
I will not talk about the Neanderthals of Thule. You're not ready for that conversation. Plunging the Earth into yet another dark age until the Agarthan Renaissance of 702 BC.
It's not on me, it's his video.
Sorry about that, I didn't see you there. I was just working on my early
You
modern
see, I didn't mess it with the audio, and the audio suddenly got higher.
Tagalog. So, you want to learn about them, right? I mean, I'm assuming you were left on the edge of your seat in the hyperwar discussion, utterly blue-balled and left gagging for context about what the hell I meant by
Is it still quiet?
Yeah, that was on purpose. Why? Well, you'll find out soon enough. Now, as I understand it, you quirked up white guys have been all over Instagram liking and making edits of things that you don't really understand again. You silly little sausages.
I did nothing, it
I'm not
was
mad
his own
at you,
video.
just at
It
the
was
state
low
of the
volume on the
education
beginning.
system. That's why I'm here to teach you real history. Just think, we're on episode 3 and we've already covered literal millennia of history that I'd managed to condense down for you. So, I'm very glad to see you show up, because I'm not going to lie, I thought that the Hyperwar video would have filtered all of you. You did pay attention during the lectures, right?
No, of course I did, yeah.
Do I have to fucking quiz you?
Yeah, I
But
did.
you know what? That's whatever. I need to hook you in for the intro.
Oh, my mouth movement is broken again.
From humble beginnings to the coalescence of spirit, weaponized and bastardized by desperation, frost and entropy itself, we will be discussing where the Neanderthals went. Why, sometimes when you sleep at night there are no dreams, and why déjà vu is actually a chthonic premonition that you must heed, lest you find yourself gazing into your own back. Quite cryptic language, isn't it? Well, that tends to happen when trying to convey and simplify such esoteric and frankly dangerous concepts. I must layer every single word spoken with multiple layers of technology so as to not only protect you from the cognito hazards, but also to try and entice you as an audience member and student to fucking pay attention in class. You've got exams.
I'm sorry.
If you're not interested in my class, then you can go fucking sit outside with the Kekistanis
paying
and listen to
attention.
the Iliad or some other shit that nobody cares about. It isn't even real. All of that is based off of the Hellenic heresy, which is going to be episode 4, but that's spoilers.
There is another episode?
Anyway, the
Oh my
Neanderthals
God.
of Thule.
Neanderthals.
Please leave a like and a comment on this video because it really helps me in the algorithm.
No, it doesn't.
Has this ever happened to you?
What the? God.
Well, introducing today's sponsor, FlexiSport, and the C7 Morpher. This thing is so modular that it can adjust to pretty much
I would be a lot worried if that type of shit's happening with me. Definitely.
whatever position you need to sit in for comfort all day. And FlexiLean Tech is precision engineered to support your upper back and keep your shoulders relaxed, regardless of your sitting style. The angle of the lumbar support can be adjusted to fit wherever you want it on your lower back, and the next-gen upgraded hybrid mesh-addressed cushioning on the seat makes it 30% more breathable and reduces pressure on your hips by 20%. And let me tell you, when you work and play games at a desk as much as I do, you really feel that 20%, especially after a hard set at the gym. And for when I really want to get cozy, not only does the C7 Morpher recline and allow me to put my
Now that is good. My chair doesn't have that. Oh, damn.
feet up, but the lumbar support and armrests adjust with it, so that I stay properly
I mean, that and it being like very good to pass that to the air pass through, you know, because my chair is hot like hell because it's made of leather, synthetic leather or something.
supported in every position, and that support goes all the way to the top with a headrest that tilts up to 135 degrees. This isn't your dad's chair. Or maybe it is because it's so comfy that it's perfect for falling asleep in. So why not treat yourself and your back to a new FlexiSpot chair with their 30-day return policy and 10-year warranty with direct replacement for damaged parts. There is no risk to discovering true comfort. And if you use my code in the description box down below, FlexiSpot will give you the best price. And also, if you have a limited budget, you can also check out FlexiSpot's C7 and C5.
Yeah, I looked for some chairs like this that he's showing on the video already before. And these chairs here are like a small fortune to buy. So no, I don't think I'm buy one of these.
Chairs, which sacrifice none of the build quality while maintaining basic functions for adjustment.
He who fled the mountain turned from the light above, for it watches and burns what is named.
Now, in case you weren't in the previous class, I'm going to have to preface this by saying that this video is the third episode in a series. Now, don't worry, you don't have to watch the previous episodes to enjoy this one. But it will definitely help make it less incoherent, which I will fully admit is a problem. Difference is, I've been studying this stuff for about 71 years in the time chamber. So, I've acclimated, and you've yet to. So, with the preface out of the way, let me set the scene for you. 8981 BC. The hyperwar between the Mongolian Khaganate and the Huanguk has been churning in the background for 540 years out east, while the Yakubian heartland has set into a deeply entrenched and stagnant regency, with Yakub himself, praise be upon him, being suspended upside down to counteract the encroaching tetanus and keep him in a psionic state of undeath, relaying telepathic orders to his underlings in a fleetingly lucid fever dream. Yakubia, being the premier power in what we currently call Europe, held vast swathes of the continent under its domain, stretching from Portugal in the west to Armenia in the east, from the upper ridges of the Sahara in the south to what we now call the Faroes in the north, all under the enlightened guidance of the All-Father and his trusted scions. Despite this stagnancy, the Praetorian regents of the realm considered it prudent to capitalise on the instability out east and consolidate the holdings in the periphery, squashing the migratory tribes of the Levant and Syria, eradicating the last major holdout for piracy in the Mediterranean, and establishing a new frontier for his excellency,
so funny,
at the cost of an embittered and unending occupation tying up resources. You see, this occupation was in part due to the centuries-long manhunt for one Abracamar,
are you
or in modern English,
Yakub wasn't real?
Abraham.
Oh my god, no!
A notorious cult leader and warlord who had a sizable domain in what we now call Anatolia. He was an abomination. Abraham is actually a genetically invoked Siamese twin, a literal genus composed of two middling twin brothers, Abrak and Hamar, fusing together and enmeshing their consciousness, resulting in a compound intelligence that really loves bombing white people, for reasons that are way beyond the scope of this lecture. All you need to know about Abraham's early life for the sake of this video is that he had a massive grudge against Yakub, praise be upon him, since he lost his fiefdom in Anatolia 2,062 years prior in 11,043 BC. Again, there's a lot here that I'm just skimming over for your sake. Anyways, after a tense standoff in his compound at the foot of what we now call Mount Supan in Turk-occupied Anatolia, Abraham successfully faked his own death with a low-yield nuclear landmine. As in, he actually managed to detonate it. But nobody believed that he had actually died. This meant that Abraham had to go into hiding somewhere in the vast and very flat Syrian steppes, whilst being actively pursued and harassed by the full might of the Yakubian expeditionary force, as well as hostile tribes, roaming slavers, and opportunistic Dravidian bounty hunters, only managing to slink across under the cover of night and by utilising his exceptional finessing expertise to disguise himself as a dromedary when near the presence of enemy patrols. Yes, really. After all, there is no way that the random camel over there squatting in a wadi, spitting at nothing, is actually the literal two-faced black shaman that you're hunting down. Don't be ridiculous. Abraham would manage to cross the steppes. And yes, the Middle East are all steppes because remember, Ice Age. And he found himself unwillingly making an encampment in the cave network found in modern Jita in Lebanon. He found himself here because the fucking idiot didn't watch his footing and he fell through a crack, becoming keenly aware of the massive complex sprawled out in front of him, and realising that he wasn't the only soul within.
Those who dwelt within, in the darkness of fountain, unformed and unthinking.
What Abraham saw laying before him were apparently people. Decrepit, caked in multiple layers of dust and black splotches, troglodytic and primitive. Think something along the lines of those weird, muddy, naked fellas that you get in the Sons of the Forest.
I will failure the test entirely.
Scuttering around on all fours, screaming at you whilst you're trying your best to tardrangle Kelvin. There's a reason that I don't like the sequel as much. Abraham managed to spook them into yielding on account of his finessing. And also his fucked up split mirror face that was talking out of both mouths at the same time and doing different voices and overall trying to do not be afraid Max. And weirdly, it worked. He embedded himself with this cackling herd of retarded cave dwellers. And gradually he learned how to converse with them via clicks and hoots.
Oh, really?
A natural form of echolocation due to literally living in a cave. After a few months of interacting and living amongst them, he came to understand these dwellers. And this is where I must veer off into speculation. You see, the actual origin of these subterranean spastics is actually quite difficult to pinpoint, due in no small part to the fact that they were evidently too stupid to actually write anything down, and that because no remains have ever been uncovered, we have no concrete idea as to who or what they were, barring the testimony of Abraham himself. You see, Abraham concluded that they must have been the descendants of Levantine blacks, whom, during the Gottkrieg between Muhammad and Yakub, praise be upon him, fled into the caves in an effort to escape the ensuing demyelination bombardments. However, due to the fact that caves are not exactly ideal fallout shelters by themselves, the demyelination particles seeped into them regardless, giving just enough of a trickle effect to the dwellers without outright demyelinating them, with those aforementioned dark splotches theorised to be vitiligo. Regardless, Abraham had somehow managed to use the dwellers to venture deeper into the caves and chart them, finding that the Gita Grotto actually extended
donation
for
of 10
hundreds,
from Julie
if not
LaCroix.
thousands of
AIO
kilometers,
Mizuki, thanks for
with
all the fun and
entire
support.
biomes existing just beneath the surface.
Thank you so much,
And
Julie.
Abraham
Thank you so
had
much,
something
really.
of a light bulb
Helps a lot.
moment.
Thank you.
This will be his kingdom. So Abraham put the dwellers to work. Mining, excavating, hollowing out swathes of the cave network, fortifying and plugging up the vast majority of the many entrances, and establishing a rapidly growing subterranean empire. All in secret, away from prying eyes and wrinkly brains. In the land of the retarded, the two-faced wizard was more than just king. He was basically God. And he definitely did a lot more than take advantage of it. You see, Abraham was for all intents and purposes a knockoff Yakub, praise be upon him, trying to emulate his processes and experiments, but without the raw intellect and life experience of the big man. So, when he decided that these dwellers were literally too stupid for anything beyond just manual labour, and they weren't even very good at that in the fucking first place, he decided to try and genetically alter them, with the objective being to remelanize them into a subservient race of subterranean black people. It backfired, thus creating the first albinos. Undeterred by this, Abraham continued with his experiments, managing to stabilize the albinos into a slightly elevated administrator caste, being designated as such not for their genuine aptitude, but because they had marginally more aptitude than their dweller peers. This allowed the albinos to garner a deeply held superiority complex that would manifest in them doing such petty things like kicking rocks towards the toiling dwellers, holding their noses and saying "P.U. stinky," and also ordering them to paint rocks, only to immediately punish them for painting rocks instead of working.
Wow, looks
alongside
like
a myriad of incredibly stupid and unproductive hazings that I'm not going to bother listing. Abraham noted this because he fucking hated it. These uplifted demelanoids were supposed to be his pseudo-white vanguard. Instead, they were a bunch of retarded petty tyrants who were too busy spending their work assignments having dwellers throw literal shit at each other instead of having them do such things as mine ore, harvest mushrooms, chart cave networks, and upkeep infrastructure. And he needed to rectify that. You see, because they were underground, they were, as previously mentioned, reliant on a wide array of mushrooms, lichen, and wriggly critters as a stable food source. Absolutely untenable, save for the fact that the dwellers and albinos had so little cognitive function that they were able to subsist off of this for up to 3 weeks without feeding. And yes, Abraham did spend far too much time testing this, paired with the fact that they had an interconnected cave network spanning the entire planet to forage in. So, they could manage. It was when, after a chance encounter, Abraham became aware of the northernmost cave entrance yet, found in modern Wolfland, Greenland. This glacial hellscape would actually be the unlikely source of his salvation, as, when he sent albino search parties above ground, they returned with reports of scattered and primitive settlements amongst the Great White Nothing of the far north. Upon investigating himself, he discovered that there was, as a matter of fact, a small yet sizable enough colony of Neanderthals living on the ice sheets near the cave entrance. This was of immense interest to Abraham, because, amongst other things, they seemed, at the very least, hardy enough to survive on this real-life equivalent to Hoth, being not only northern Greenland, but northern Greenland during the fucking Ice Age. Abraham hoped that it wasn't just physical resilience that these Neanderthals had, however. He hoped that it was the partial result of cognitive adaptations. See, Abraham theorized that physical biology could only go so far to ensure survival in such a harsh and unforgiving environment, concluding that it would have to be the result of a baseline level of cognition to allow collective thinking and tribal dynamics. In simple terms, Abraham hoped that their survival there was proof that they were smart enough to operate in groups and would obey a hierarchy. Then he met them.
It might not be good. I drew them below my bush and ripped on their side.
Now, you might be familiar with how Neanderthals look and maybe acted, being bulky, squat gub-gubs that are incredibly spurgy yet remarkably sensitive little souls. Solitary by nature, but still formed into tight-knit cliques. But then there's how they talk. They can't. Indeed, because the Neanderthals are neurologically undercooked, they can't actually conceive of what we would consider a spoken language, instead resorting to gestures, whistles, hoots and yelps. I mean, it's still a step up from the albinos, but you know, fuck. Like, the fact even their voices sound stupid. I know I'm not going to do an impression for you. The BBC did that
Please
for
don't.
me.
Please don't.
Nasal now. 1, 2, 3.
So,
What
as you would
is
expect,
that?
it was apparently quite the challenge to make first
What the
contact
fuck
with
is
them,
that,
with
man? Oh
Abraham
my
having
God.
to approach them essentially as an omnipotent cryptid a la a yeti, as opposed to a person, so that the Neanderthals don't chimp out. This was surprisingly easy to do, as Abraham had, I shit you not, been wearing a literal skin suit made up of dead dwellers that had excess
Oh my God,
fat
what the
melted and smeared all over it for heat insulation.
It's
Because, I
weird.
mean, be honest, it's not like his underlings were competent enough to tame and spindle silk for its construction. And his conveniently large, dusty poncho isn't good enough for much beyond aura farming and looking spooky in the distance. This sort of worked
Mark
insofar
looks
as the
artist.
tribe of 13 Neanderthals
yeah,
were
that-
frankly too freaked out to actually stop him from just waltzing into their communal igloo and start speaking in tongues to them. Then hypnotizing them like chickens by getting them to follow his index finger and moving it around slowly in a straight line. Mesmerizing the dim proto-people and rendering them docile. Once enthralled, Abraham would then proceed to walk slowly backwards whilst they were still locked on to his finger, making them follow him back to the cave so that they could be restrained and prepared for indoctrination and integration, respectively. Then, the albinos saw them. Upon seeing these primitive-looking yet cognitively superior tundra grugs being led into their gay little subterranean fiefdoms and being given attention by Big Daddy Split-Faced Wizard King, they naturally started chimping out, rallying the dwellers to try and apprehend and then kill these interlopers, managing to actually fell one of them before being promptly crushed by Abraham using a flashbang. In a pitch-dark cave on a bunch of pseudo-farmer.
The fuck is this?
They were all either dead or rendered functionally useless because they were now completely blind. Basically, it is exactly like flashbanging a farmer. It was when Abraham was cleaning up the mess and decimating his albinos as punishment that something quite interesting started to happen. Now, if you remember from episode 1, the Neanderthals are actually the result of the Shaitan 2 program, when Yakub modified a group of Asians by ripping out their line-scale-riddled pineal glands and replacing it with the ever-enigmatic Fungus X. Now, tell me what happens when a fungus finds somewhere dark and warm. It grows.
No.
Indeed, it would seem that as a result of literal millennia of isolation and inbreeding, these Neanderthals actually mutated with an abnormally high presence of Fungus X in their system, with their brain being cannibalized by the malignant mushroom, devouring their intellect, but causing rather interesting effects. And Abraham
Yes, he's all
was
veridic.
utterly
He's all true.
fascinated by it. After dumping the failed Neanderthal's body into what was essentially a petri vat, he then began to vociferously study the fungus that was rapidly devouring the corpse from the inside out, causing him to start stimming with excitement and glee because he finally had something to work with. Then he found his remaining albinos trying to tamper with the sample by fucking eating it. So they were due for another fucking flashbang. After finishing off and collecting these new albino defectors, Abraham noticed something also very curious, as the bodies of those who had consumed the fungified cadaver were not only being consumed by the fungus in their bodies, but they were also
Pretty
floating.
curious, like Maverick.
Interesting. So it turns out that when a demyelinated black person of a high enough impurity, aka albinos, digest Fungus X, it actually gets absorbed and integrated into their fundamental biology in distinctive ways. See, because albinos are famously without melanin. When they eat the fungus, it actually gets broken down
Yeah,
and
women
then
certainly
proceeds to
tend to have a
bind to
problem
their
with
melanin
fungus growth,
receptors.
yeah.
This doesn't necessarily mean they turn into a mushroom type of colour, because what the fuck does that even mean? No, instead, the fungus proceeds to act as a weird replacement and supplement for the albino's complete absence of melanin. And that cascades in quite a few ways. Alongside giving you your skin colour, maintaining brain health, regulating psionic ability, and making sure you get a nice restful sleep, melanin also has an even more important function. It helps act as a boundary for your soul. Allow me to explain.
No.
You see, your
No.
soul is not
Please
actually a
explain.
stationary and consolidated thing that you can just effortlessly have. Think of it more like a gas. And melanin keeps the gas in, contained and confined to your physical body and inseparable from your consciousness. The less melanin you have, the more your soul seeps out. That is why the palest whites, ergo albinos, and gingers are commonly identified to not have souls. Because they kinda don't. Now, there are a few ways to work around this debilitating weakness. For example, the Asian race currently embroiled in the hyperwar have managed to engineer a psychobiotic gelatin layer to be smeared and absorbed into their skin,
If this person really exists, pull
allowing a
him.
small degree of soul retention at the cost of being incredibly tedious and quite expensive.
If this person exists, who are you to think you're ugly?
The carryover effects of this are still felt to this day. And they're only getting worse. There's then the Dravidians, who tried to import and then domestically manufacture the Asian gel layer. They were unsuccessful in their efforts due to a myriad of factors. The carryover effects of this are also still felt today.
Oh, I remember this. Oh, God, I remember this. No, please take away the image out of my head. Take this image out of my head. Oh, my God.
That it's just getting worse. But, hold on a tick,
ew.
if this soul mumbo-jumbo is all true, then how do us white cheese monkeys operate? Do we have souls? No. At least, not your own. The white people manage to avoid the pitfalls of soullessness by having the mostly empty space filled by the psionic presence of Yakub. Praise be upon him. So, in other words, you're housing a small fragment of his soul that has been sort of leased out to you. And in return, you fulfill his bidding, making cornball funk edits about random sex offenders and vague posting with a statue profile pic about the West TM. So, what does all of this have to do with the fungus? Well, it's simple. The fungus not only acted as a
Little
barrier to
shits
house
with no
the
soul.
natural soul, but also acted as an interface for it. How? Well, you've clearly never heard of Oregon's honey mushrooms, and you clearly don't know that they talk to each other. They are talking
Oh,
right
yeah,
now
yeah, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
about
I always
you.
knew that. I always, don't you know
Really
that,
letting them live in your
Chad?
socks
Don't you know,
rent-free.
guys? No, no.
Regardless, Abraham knew of the mushroom's inherent abilities, and he was going to take full advantage of it. Indeed, like the coffee bean in chief, Abraham was going to engineer a race of loyal
Didn't you
ivory-skinned
know that
mongoloids
mushrooms
that
talk
he could
with each other?
influence and control through his comparatively behemothing psychic powers. For real this time. So it was then, after countless years in the caves, tinkering and toying with mouldy bodies like a cretin, that he finally cracked Fungus X,
Hello,
refining
JJ
and then
Beats.
standardizing it into a simple injection that can be introduced to either a Neanderthal embryo, having it engrossed into the network TM, or in the case of Abraham, have it be injected into both of his pineal glands. Again, he's got two
Pineal
faces,
glands.
so 2 mouths, 2 noses, 5 eyes, 2 brains, etc., etc. And yes, you didn't mishear me. Of course, he had a 5th eye right over where the 3rd eye would be on a normal person. Because of course, it just makes sense. Now, what did this treatment do
Totally
for
does.
the genetic abomination? Well, it allowed him to remote control anyone who had a sufficient amount of Fungus X in their system, with the engineered Neanderthals being devious little imps for Abraham to remote control and possess, allowing him to channel his inner harbinger and say, "I am assuming direct control." But hey, it turns out that having legions at your command isn't really worth much if there's nothing to conquer. No great foe to best. No challenge. Well, it's a good thing that Abraham knew just the
Daniel, so Fungus X is how we got X-Men. I think it's how I think we got X-Men with the few people with uncalcified pineal glands. Yeah.
guy to square up to. He just needed to prepare.
It's up there for the engrossment. And when I was 2, I am many, no voice but mine, or Abraham.
Abraham had raised his legions, hundreds of thousands strong. Neanderthals who were shroomed up and split into 2 groups, with the first stationed at the entrance of every charted cave to act as garrisons and also as
Thank you,
raiders to
Julie.
steal food, supplies, and people for study. The second group was sent into the farthest and deepest recesses of the earth, charting out every corner of what we all now refer to as the Hollow Earth. Or
I think we all heard this theory already, right, guys? There is a huge hole on the top. I think I don't remember if there is on bottom too. I think it's on the top. In Antarctica. I always confuse them, or I don't know. And inside this hole, there's another planet inside, and with the nucleus of the Earth serving as a sun. It's something.
Gartha. With a constant inflow of supplies and
Gartha.
biomass
A
from the
Gartha.
surface, Abraham managed to consolidate his holdings and fortify it, using abductees as slave labour to excavate caverns, mine ores, and build infrastructure like roads, factories, and housing for the Neanderthal class, being worked quite literally to death with their bodies then fed into the nearest compost bin for this 5-eyed tyrant king. The Neanderthals, over generations of engrossment in the synergy, had actually managed to evolve
It's
into
generation
increasingly
of
complex
engrossment.
cognitive beings, with the brightest minds having a degree of autonomy and being put to work in colossal literal think tanks and academies, where they can take full advantage of their increasingly hive mind behaviour, whilst the dimmest ones are either just composted or sent on suicidal expeditions to the uncharted regions of the world, whether that be above or below. Due to their complete obsolescence, the albino dwellers were composted almost immediately. Who could have seen that coming? However, due to Abraham having an absurd ego that dictates that he catalogues and documents absolutely everything, he genetically sequenced and archived them before liquidation. Why? Well, so we can learn about his totally badass and inspiring rise to power, and so we can all bask in his glory like he's fucking Alexander or something. Yeah, it's also worth noting that most of the sources for this entire tale come from Abraham's account. So, let's take it all with a pinch of salt. Regardless, you might be wondering by this point, why? Why is Abraham composting so much? Is he just really into gardening? Well, in a manner of speaking, yes. He was farming fungus X strains for weaponization, experimentation, and consumption for both the Neanderthals and himself. This would have quite a few different effects. You see, whilst you may understand the rationale for feeding the grug's shrooms, Abraham himself was also getting into the habit of gorging on it, because it turns out that not even he was immune to its effects. Indeed, the modified strain injected into his pineal glands had started to influence him, making him have a weird longing for the dark and damp caverns. Talking to himself, because it turned out that he was also a great listener, seeing things that he wasn't quite sure were actually there, and being completely convinced that the worms are back and I can feel them under my skin. In other words, he had become a complete schizophrenic. This spout of mental derailment was worsened by the fact that the composted biomass of literally millions that were being distilled and injected straight into Abraham.
I feel that I get a little bit more schizophrenic each new episode of this that I watch myself.
Had gradually started to dilute his own sense of self, with the organic sludge containing just enough leftover synaptic material and grey matter to turn his brain into a neurological ship of Theseus. This was also compounded with the exponential increase in cognition that he experienced, with his dual-linked brains growing so big and wrinkly that such abstract things as space, time, and object permanence started to lose meaning, with the now immobile figure managing to think so hard that he was able to halt and then reverse entropy itself. Because he was so fucking obese that it quite literally defied logic. They had to hollow out an entire cavern with depth charges just to stick him in it. And within 2 months he had already formed around it and was peeking out over it. So they just kept expanding it. And that is how we got the Mammoth Cave Network in Kentucky, with his nucleus in the cavern's sprawling rotunda. Past a point, Abraham stopped caring for his own biological constraints, thinking his body into changing to house his mighty and ever-growing girth and intellect, slithering and writhing around the pitch-black pits, waiting for compost to be dumped near one of his many, many mouths by his underlings, whom by this point were understandably absolutely fucking terrified of their lord. However, that fear was second only to those who resided above. Indeed, the wider world were all vaguely aware of the happenings beneath them, with Yakub, praise be upon him, sending out a memorandum to all white people to watch themselves around the mouths of caves, lest they come into contact with the supposed troglodytes that are said to roam nearby, as well as snatching people for unknown purposes, never to be seen again. Now, there is much speculation as to why Yakub, praise be upon him, didn't just order
Praise be
troops
upon
into
him.
the caves and wipe out the encroaching madness of Abraham, the devourer of gods, and his ilk. Some say that he was preoccupied with the happenings in the Hyperwar. Some say he was curious about Abraham's experiments and let him cook for a little while just to see what would happen. And then there are those that simply posit that he either just forgot or he couldn't be bothered. I'll leave that debate up to you. The end result was the same regardless. Abraham and his Neanderthals
total
were able
debate
to
that.
pillage and
Praise be
pilfer the
upon him.
countryside unmolested for centuries, acquiring millions of people from all across the world in a period of time referred to as the Agarthan Renaissance, including having Neanderthals dress up like goofy little goobers to lure children out into the woods so that they could abduct them. And yes, I am only now telling you that what we call gnomes were actually mythologized Neanderthal
Suspicious.
field operatives.
Devious.
Make of this information what you will. As a matter of fact, much of the European folk tales that we all know today can actually be traced to the Agarthan Renaissance, with Abraham using his behemothic psionic
Welcome,
powers
Sichu.
to disguise his pawns as all manner of beasts and spirits. Say, for
This is
example,
my old model.
Abraham wants some strong and strapping white men for experimentation and or a mukbang. He would use his finessing skills to mentally project a facade over Neanderthal teams to disguise them as spooky cryptids like werewolves or gypsies, to invoke a wave of panic and paranoia, and, by extension, hunting parties to be organised and sent into the very forests where the field operatives would be waiting for them. Sometimes they'd even mimic the faces and voices of family members to lure them in.
Kazella.
Keep this in mind for later. However, naturally, some people would start to take note if their husbands, brothers and sons just disappeared after venturing into the woods. So, to alleviate this, Abraham would flash clone the
Suspicious.
abductee and then fill them with the fungal strain to allow limited influence and memory transfer, essentially replacing loved ones with shroomed up flesh automata. A skin-deep
go forward.
imitation of white devilry that dilutes and intermingles with the Yakubian populace. This was biological alongside psychological warfare. These imitators would, over time, start degrading, with the fungal implants slowly overtaking their own physiology and culminated in them being exiled from the village or quarantined because it turns out when people start fucking molting and exuding literal spores, yeah, no shit, people are going to want to stay away from you. This culminated in a mass panic over this supposed infection, with riots
I
and
don't understand
pogroms
what
breaking
has
out all
happened in
across
that
Europe
episode.
to get rid of these so-called mushroom men. This would become an increasing headache for the Yakubian Regency that would only be made worse when you account
Take
for
it,
the
Sichu.
concurrent abduction schemes in the east with the Fingolian Slav program. And Yakub, praise be upon him, couldn't be
Praise be
made
upon
to
him.
look weak like this. So, only then, in 8577 BC, did the white men of Europe start to actually mobilise against the Abrahamic shenanigans foisted upon them, with many caves getting burned out by purification teams who had become increasingly fond of nitroglycerin and its derivatives, dumping a few barrels in, getting a comically large rope and then lighting the end of it on fire, resulting in quite the detonation and the complete deafening and blinding of anyone unlucky enough to be deeper in the caves. Abraham would retaliate, having Neanderthals sprinkle spores over graveyards and household pets to weaponize corpses and animals respectively, alongside radicalising the indigenous non-Abrahamic Neanderthals found in small pockets and reservations across the British Isles, Faroes, Iceland and Greenland, collectively known as Thule. These Neanderthals were essentially working as a diversion to tie up Yakubian forces in the north, allowing the dastardly Shroomjacks to strike from the south. Ironically enough, springboarding from the very caves that Abraham had fell into all those years ago. But they had to act fast, as Abraham's hunger was exponential, and this decontamination procedure was strangling his food supply. From here, I could rattle off countless individual battles, incidents, and events that took place during the active period of the Renaissance. And indeed, they could be covered in a future lecture if you show enough interest. However, for the sake of brevity, I'll cover but 2 more events before I tie up some loose ends and reveal to you my hesitation in covering this. That being the cerebral schism and the harrowing.
Chapter 5, The Betrayer, and from the many, a discord was sown bones, yet bearing my form.
Now,
Killed
by
the Necromancer.
8322 BC, the Agarthan Renaissance was at its zenith, with Abraham and Yakub, praise be upon him, engaged in a great game of cat and mouse, with the latter having to whack-a-mole Neanderthal incursions wherever they popped up, whilst the former just smugly taunted and jeered despite the fact that he was steadily losing. Because ego is everything it seems. Despite this, however, Abraham wasn't just going to sit there and waste away whilst everything that he had built up would gradually fall asunder. Oh no, for you see, his centuries of work had finally started to bear fruit, as the next generation of Neanderthal was just on the cusp of being rolled out. You see, despite the work already put into the Abrahamic Neanderthal, they still had some rather hard limitations. For example, even though their cognition was slightly elevated from baseline and easy to influence psionically, their overall agency and ability to adapt to developing situations was frankly quite atrocious, because they were also frankly incapable of thinking for themselves in any way whatsoever. And this meant that just like the blacks of Muhammad all those eons ago, the second the whites used their perfidious technology, the Abrahamic creations were helpless to resist it, falling for it every fucking time. This simply would not do. So Abraham decided to allocate a frankly unreasonable amount of resources and biomass towards a retrofit, and also an improvement program for these bleating grugs. Issue was that not only were purebred Neanderthals increasingly difficult to come by due to attrition, but that the Abrahamics were starting to get notions of introspection. And Abraham himself was seemingly becoming senile, with his 2 identical brains becoming increasingly dissonant as time went on. As some of you more astute noticers may have intuited by now, yes, the second generation of Abrahamic Neanderthal were, as a matter of fact, the genesis of the Jewish race, being the culmination of, by this point, thousands of years of research and development and cave shenanigans. All to usher in the arrival of what is essentially a Neanderthal that can actually do more than just string a couple of sentences together. Terrifying, I know. So, what made these Jews so special? Well, the main aim of the program was, as previously mentioned, meant to mitigate the vulnerabilities that Abrahamic forces had against technology. And, as the Dark Lord had discovered, the only way to protect them was to have a soul capable of adequately strong finessing. Issue was that only gifted black people have such souls. So a workaround must be made. Abraham decided to kill quite a few birds with one stone. And he started partitioning excess segments of his inconceivably large soul and infusing it with genetically refined Neanderthal/white hybrid forms. allowing the Jews to not only blend in better amongst the whites behind enemy lines, but also ensuring their complete and unwavering loyalty subconsciously, whilst having still near complete immunity to technology. These Jewish cadres had but one simple objective:
Technology.
secure the levers of power,
Technology.
spread Abraham's influence through intermixing, guile, and conquest, and fold every soul on the planet under the synergy. Indeed, by this point in history, Abraham's Napoleon complex had grown so great that he had come to the conclusion that he could actually stand on equal footing with none other than Allah himself. And through the forced blending of all humanity's races into a pliable baseline under his control, that they could finally return to the heights of the pre-Cosmokrieg Al-Lunasari, whom, if you remember, were quite literally spacefaring psychics living on the moon before the dastardly actions of Yeshua set humanity asunder and confined us to this terrestrial prison. These Jews caused absolute mayhem across much of the world, migrating, embedding, and subverting countless tribes, companies, and nations to serve the ends of He who dwells beneath, ambiently ushering in an age of paranoia and distrust. Because they could be any one of us. It could be you. It could be me. It could even be @Based Groiper 1488. This pandemonium slowed the onslaught against Abraham,
Yeah,
in
totally,
time managing to
totally.
halt it entirely, though at the cost of making many more enemies. I say that because the next character to enter this story is frankly a fucking mystery. His name is Otzi. He was, by all accounts,
my
a fairly
God.
successful but otherwise unremarkable Neanderthal that was grandfathered into Judaism through a retrofitting scheme, being given the rare privilege of getting a sort of soul. Otzi was stationed somewhere in North Africa when
sort
he
of
most
soul.
notably went missing alongside the rest of his cell. This was unusual for a few reasons, because other than the obvious prospects of rogue Jews, this should have been impossible due to all Jews having a literal fragment of Abraham's soul. And as a result, he was always aware of what the Jews are doing and where they are. Yet Otzi just fucking poofed into thin air without the faintest hint of where he went. How tastefully mysterious. He eventually resurfaced almost 153 years later in the Sof Omar caves in Ethiopia, comatose and found in a spot that should have been physically impossible, as he was somehow found tucked behind an Abrahamic patrol. As in, he just got fucking teleported just a few feet behind them whilst they were walking on their route. So obviously he
I
was
don't
lifted
remember,
and
Blaze.
taken
When
back
this
for
is so
study,
fun.
because what the fuck? And they found that
It doesn't
all of
make
his
any
organs
sense. It's
were
not me
backwards.
to make sense.
I mean,
Makes sense.
his entire anatomy was mirrored, with his heart on the right side of his body, etc., etc. This understandably befuddled the think tanks of Agartha. Then, that befuddlement turned to panic as he went and dematerialized right in front of them, reappearing mere feet from Abraham himself, managing to spout off some cryptic-sounding bullshit that sadly wasn't recorded, causing the Big Cheese himself to become apoplectic and start chasing this mirrored deserter, inadvertently
Yeah.
worming his way back to the Middle East. Surprise, surprise, it was a trap. As somewhere in a cave beneath the Atlantic Ocean, a methodically and surgically laid out array of explosives were in place, waiting for him. And when he sprung it, he found himself impaled by a frankly ridiculously large stalagmite, critically and cleanly severing both of the gargantuan hemispheres of Abraham's brain, resulting in what scholars call the cerebral schism, with the sudden and severe brain damage resulting in what was referred to as a panpsionic mania, with Abraham and by extension every other organism with Fungus X in its system essentially all having fits and seizures simultaneously, compromising thousands of Jewish operations by making
How
all
is
of the
that
Jews
even
collectively
possible?
literally shit
How
their
is that
pants,
even possible?
making them very, very easy to identify. Abraham himself almost succumbed to meningitis, saved only by his
It
thrashing
happened to
hitting the
you 3
ceiling and
times last
causing a
week?
reservoir of subglacial ice water to start flooding into the cavern, ironically reducing the swelling enough to save his and, by extension, millions of lives. At the cost of potentially billions of lives, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Deciding that he had finally had enough of this indirect skullduggery bullshit, Abraham had started to slither once again, this time making his way towards none other than the very heart of Yakubia, the current capital and internment site of the Peanut Princeps himself, in Switzerland. Because of course it's in Switzerland. It was when he was beneath the Alps that he came across something that he could not have possibly anticipated. An electro-psionic ring shield surrounding the holy city, cock-blocking old Spergenstein spivshits from administering the killing blow to the suspended coffee bean. But then something truly unexpected happened. Another perfectly placed bundle of explosives planted by Otzi that knocked a hole in the array, allowing Abraham to pass through to the caverns beneath the holy city. This is where I'd like to partake in a spot of speculation. It's currently unknown what Otzi even was, much to the frustration of scholars like myself. However, I do ascribe to one theory that is frankly more of a Hail Mary than mere Occam's razor. I believe that Otzi's condition is not the actions of a Jew who managed to get lucky and get transformed into a real goy, but instead the actions of a long-forgotten adversary who would absolutely have a bone to pick with both of
knowledge.
these cretins.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not talking about the Al-Uras of Tartaria fame. That's right, I am of course alluding to none other than Muhammad himself. After all, you may remember that he is not only currently deep within the Ngwenyi mines in southern Africa, waiting for the right time to return, but he is also the only person in recorded history to have such an esoteric and intimate knowledge of psionics and finessing. This man is capable of very many things. Holding a grudge for thousands of years is but one of them. Theorizing aside, what I can say for certain is that indeed Abraham and Yakub, praise be upon him, had a standoff within the Praetorian chamber, with the two pausing their destined showdown to watch Otzi once again fuck up the flow of everything by fainting between the two of them before dematerializing again, with both of them convinced that he was a pawn of the other. Now, sadly, I don't have the exact breakdown of this mighty clash move for move, but it ultimately culminated in the mortal wounding of Abraham and the hurried retreat of all Jews underground, both literally and figuratively, with Yakub, praise be upon him, expending so much energy during the exchange that he became psionically comatose alongside physically. This would immediately cause a cascade, including the events of the Hellenic heresy, and more importantly...
Chapter 60, Harrowing. And in that week I was scattered abroad, no one will, but hunger made men fold.
Indeed, it was Yakub's invoked silence that resulted in the cascade of events that led to the thermonuclear launch that ended the hyperwar and plunged humanity back into the pits of despair, with Yakubia fracturing and collapsing following the strikes, the heresy and the absence of their leader when they needed him the most, making the Agarthan Neanderthals and Jews take refuge in the caves, being sheltered from the absolute worst of the strikes, but at the cost of having shitloads of vaporized ice turn into floodwater that quickly funneled into the very caves that they were hiding in. One such Jew who took charge and rallied the survivors to a safer place is one Noah, who managed to lead a group to safety in Anatolia whilst the rains fell, These Noahides would in time wander their way southwards towards the Levant, retracing the steps of their master and in time splitting off into their own bickering tribes, never able to truly overcome their own petty factionalism until after the Second World War. Hold on to that thought. The Neanderthals left behind and alone once again
I never
gradually
hated
reverted
these
to their
thoughts.
old
Like,
way,
I don't remember the
kicking
last one
rocks
that
and
he
beating
said.
each other over the head with big sticks in Thule, eventually being intermingled and killed off by the rebounding white tribes over the course of millennia,
The title of his video
finding
is
their
The
own way
Neanderthals
in
of
lieu of
Thule.
their dear leader's silence. The overwhelming majority of the caves that
Mizuki
made up Agartha were
Mizuki
collapsed and
killed the
flooded by the strikes,
calcifier
with
by
the
Hill
integral
Dwayne.
mid-Atlantic cavern being rendered completely unnavigable, and by extension isolating the Eurasian Jews from the very few and very esoteric North American Jews clustered around the Mammoth Caves and Salt Lake, who once again are a whole other topic with their own can of worms that I can't be bothered opening right now. There's a reason why I haven't really talked about the red race thus far. Gradually, things began to calm down across the world, with the floods stabilising and civilization being given yet another chance to exist. And this is where what we call Orthodox history begins in earnest, with the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia et al. All proceeding as you were probably taught in those revisionist hellscapes that you call school. However, throughout this transitionary phase, something odd was recently discovered. Otzi had resurfaced and wandered about for about 5,000 years. This, understandably, shouldn't be possible. Yet, he did, seemingly following the cavern trails of Eurasia and Africa in penance for his betrayal of Abraham, in time morphing into the legend of the Wandering Jew, cursed with undeath and forever walking around aimlessly. We only found out about this bombshell in 1991 when we actually managed to find his body in the Italian Alps, having been shot in the back with an arrow and dumped in a valley before being frozen in time, becoming the oldest cold case in human history, because we don't know who shot him. So why the fuck did I decide that up until now you just weren't ready to hear about the Neanderthals of Thule? Well, it's because we are still living through it, and I didn't think it was yet necessary to clue you in on, as this sort of knowledge can very easily become a cognito hazard if not given proper context and time to internalise. Have you ever wondered about Operation High Jump? You know, when the US Navy went down to New Schwabenland? Or, as you may not be aware, the Nazi German Antarctic territory, which by 1946 was completely uninhabited, barring the odd seasonal whaler. The official MO for High Jump was to seize the place and establish a series of small exploratory and scientific bases. Yet, if that was the case, then why the fuck did they send 13 ships down, including the aircraft carrier USS Philippine Sea? It's not like they would be expecting enemy forces down there. So that begs the question, why? Why did the United States get so heavily involved in Afghanistan? It must just be a coincidence that Shambhala, or the contemporary Buddhist term for Agartha, is said to potentially have an entrance around the Hindu Kush Valley, guarded by a retinue of giants that the US military supposedly fought and killed near Kandahar. But that would just be ridiculous, nay, absurd. Well, then why does the United States want Greenland so badly? It's not like that was the staging point for the entire Abrahamic operation against Yakubia, and that due to receding ice layers, more and more cave entrances are being unearthed alongside vast mineral and ore deposits. I just can't quite put my finger on why. Why does
US
the United
knows the
States, a
truth.
nation of mostly vainglorious mystery meat goblins, act so irrationally at the thought of black excellence despite worshipping them culturally? Posting weird AI edits of them willingly wandering into those cursed caves and pits to reunite with Hulk Hogan, Diddy, John McAfee, and Charlie Kirk of all fucking people. It's almost like these are cognitive weapons designed to normalize it and lure you into those caves, portraying it as idyllic whilst using the faces and voices of dead loved ones to reel you in. Where have we heard that before? All the while, the United States itself is ruled by a borderline vampiric cast of waspy warhawks that have such a deep and intimate relationship with Israel, the state dedicated to the reconsolidation of the Jewish diaspora under a single ideology and flag. Even going so far as to actively get involved in a military operation just because they were planning to anyways. Interesting. It's almost like Abraham had prepared some contingencies with that big wrinkly brain of his, and that his plans are in motion as we speak. After all, the Jews of modernity have fragments of his soul within them. Who's to say that after a large enough number of them all convene in one place, that Abraham won't just rematerialize? The synergy lives, and it's been playing the long game. All of this is to say, stay away from caves. They're dangerous, easy to get lost in, prone to collapse, and filled with horrors beyond your comprehension. Also, actually, I briefly mentioned in the Hyperwar lecture that there was one batshit theory that I'll cover at the end. I never actually disclosed that, and I do apologise. There's reason to suggest that Fingal cloned himself and got into orbit before the nuclear exchange, and that he is still up there. Make of that what you will.
Makes sense
but for now, I'm going to have to leave you to stew in the unwitting enlightenment of today's lesson. Next time, we delve into the Hellenic heresy. Should be a lot shorter and sweeter than these dense tomes. Only a few hundred years of history as opposed to these multi-millennia monsters that we've been doing so far. And remember, I am a historian, I'm not schizophrenic.
I believe you. You're not schizophrenic. You're not. Yeah. I'm with you. We are with you. Yeah. It's all Yakub's given knowledge to you, to us. Praise be upon him. Yeah. Oh my God! What the fuck are you talking in the chat? Okay. All right. Well, this is all for the videos that I have today. Just want to remind you guys to subscribe, follow, blah blah blah, support Foxu, cause WalkTube hates Fox a lot. Like, it's deleting my channel out of existence. I barely get 300 views on a video, 200 to 300 views. Things are getting a lot incomprehensibly level, like, difficult on the channel, and yeah, I count with you guys' support to survive on this platform, okay? Oh my gosh, it hurts to always remember that. It really hurts. But it is what it is. I will keep, like, persisting there until hopefully one day it gets back to normal. Who knows? Who knows, right? But yeah. Before we go any further, I want to take this brief moment here to thank all of you, my patrons, for the incredible support to my work here on YouTube, and especially my 5-tailed fox tier member, the Holy Ball, and all of my 3-tailed fox tier members, Wallony Wolf, Fanny Sylvie, Hit Himself, Zalost, Eustace the Useful, Zelazazaya, Mr. NER Eden, Max Tenor, Nugutino, Avery, TBCI, and TV8. Thank you very, very much. You guys are amazing. Also, thanks to everyone that have been supporting me on Ko-Fi, Kick, and to all of my YouTube members. You can support this channel life and growth with just $5 a month and gain access to many perks. This is less than a burrito. Check out my Patreon. Link is in the description below. And that's it for today, my dear Foxlings. See you guys in the next one. Bye bye.